Ashton Genty, Amari and Hampton, even Woody Marks got in on the action. So, Chris, I feel like it's time now. Bill, let's make it happen. He's gonna boom, right?
Highly doubtful.
Come on. I mean, look, there's a chance, right? Maybe, possibly. All right, we'll hold off another week before putting Bill on the boom list. But we have several players we feel really good about. They're gonna go off, maybe go nuclear in week 5. Believe it or not, almost 70% of our viewers are not yet subscribed to this channel. Help us get to 100K. We're on the way there. We have great support from our community for the past several years. It's time to get to 100,000 subscribers. You can be one. All you do is just click that subscribe button, and that would help us out. Well, we actually do have one rookie running back we're going to mention, but first, let's talk receiver. And that's really where you need help these days anyways, right? With all those injuries. Here's a player that isn't on the must-start list, and I still think he's basically a must-start. Some people are doubting Nico Collins. I get it. He hasn't been worth a first-round pick yet. I mean, he just hasn't. Statistically, only one 100-yard game on the season and 2 touchdowns. It's okay. Like, numbers are fine, but it's not what you expected. He's 23rd in the league in receiving yards so far. You expect this guy to be a wide receiver 1 almost every single week. And that Houston offense was pretty putrid up until they finally got to play the Tennessee Titans, who outmatched them by being more putrid. But that said, you're like, can I really trust Nico Collins rest of the season to help carry my team? And the answer is, for this week, absolutely yes, because he's actually somehow going to have probably a better matchup than he did last week. And I'll let you talk about that in a second. Keep in mind, this guy is still the whole offense that has been going there. I mean, he's by far the number 1 receiver. He's still among the elite in terms of targets per route run, targets in general. CJ Stroud finally looked a little bit better. I know it was the Titans, but he completed 79% of his passes, and we actually saw a guy like Jaden Higgins score a touchdown and get involved. So that's got to make you feel better about Houston, at least a little bit. But I think what really makes me feel better is that I actually think the Baltimore defense is worse than the Titans defense at this point.
Oh, absolutely. And you look at it, like going into that game last week against the Chiefs, they were already down their best defensive tackle, who's now out for the entire season. Their starting nose tackle, one of their starting edge rushers, and their best linebacker. And then what happened in that game against the Chiefs? Well, they lost another linebacker and 2 of their top corners. Now, it does sound like maybe Kyle Van Noy, their linebacker, can play this week, but is that really going to have any impact on Nico? No impact at all. Also, a lot of times I talk about like coverages, the way teams play these coverage shells. Well, Baltimore is in man coverage 3rd most of any defense, just about 42% of the time. Nico's yards per route run goes up 15% versus man coverage. Why does this matter? Well, according to Ryan Heath over at Fantasy Points, who did some great research on this, he says in matchups against a defense that's played at least a 42% man coverage rate, players with at least a 10% better yards per route run versus man coverage hit 20 plus fantasy points 25.5% of the time. That's about 100. That's almost a 100% better ceiling rate than all players across all matchups. So this is obviously a smash spot for him against the Ravens. Not to mention, you talked about CJ Stroud. He's kind of been the thing that's held Nico back a little bit this year, right? The offensive line, he's getting pressured all the time. Well, we don't have to worry about that this week. Last week, the Ravens pressured Patrick Mahomes on only 15% of his dropbacks, which was the lowest pressure rate Mahomes has faced in his entire career, and it's the 2nd lowest pressure rate the Ravens have had since 2017. They're not going to get pressure on CJ Stroud, and they're not going to be able to cover Nico Collins. Yeah, like almost, I tweeted out during the games on Sunday, like just start your wide receivers against the Ravens. Start your wide receivers against the Ravens, especially Nico Collins.
All right, so another young stud wide receiver. You figure, I mean, at this point with CeeDee Lamb now, you've got to start George Pickens every week. And look, we've had George Pickens as a boom pick a couple of times already this season. But not last week, because last week, and it was like, okay, we know he is a very high ceiling type of player. He's going to get the targets. He got the targets, 11 targets. We know he has the potential to always score a touchdown. Well, now he's got, 4 in the past 3 games. Didn't see the monster game coming against that really good Packers defense, because I also didn't see a 40-40 tie coming. But look, never should have doubted George Pickens. We said you take the risk reward pick here. He's got that potential to go either extreme. He was extreme last week. 8 catches, 134 yards, and now again against a really good Packers defense. And so you figure this has got to be an extreme must start. I mean, could he possibly match what he did last week or even do better?
Well, he might. I mean, the Jets' defense looks absolutely terrible. I mean, like Tyreek Hill was having a nice game before he got hurt there, but you look at it on paper, you see the Jets, they're 20th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, so you're like, oh, well, that's not great. But look a little closer. They've only had 489 routes against them. If you take it on a per route basis, they're allowing 0.4 fantasy points per route run. That would be second worst behind only the Dallas Cowboys. And you think, well, maybe he's going to get Sauce Gardner this week. Can we really expect a big game against Sauce Gardner? Sauce Gardner hasn't even been that good this year. PFF has him graded 60.6 coverage grade. He ranks 41st among all corners right now. Something is wrong with this defense, and I don't think it's going to get fixed before these two teams play this week. So Pickens, yeah, like the worry here was like, can he be that guy, right? Can he step up and be an alpha number one wide receiver? Well, he proved he can. In this matchup, he should have no problems.
And that's not the last player we're going to have from that matchup. You just got to feel sometimes there are certain teams you want to roll with them because their offense is good and their defense is horrible. And that's exactly the type of action you want in fantasy in your lineup. So let's go to the other side there. You just mentioned the Dallas Cowboys defense. Who gets to face that defense? That secondary, it's Garrett Wilson. Yeah, we picked Garrett Wilson a couple times as well, and he has not let down. But it's kind of perplexing. Some people still don't view Garrett Wilson as like a number one receiver. Like, I know we don't have him as absolute must start yet, although might do that soon, especially after this week. I mean, there's no question if you have Garrett Wilson, I can't even think of a receiver, honestly, that I would not bench for Garrett Wilson here. The thing is, people are worried, Justin Fields is not that great. Look, Justin Fields doesn't have to put up good passing numbers, as you see every week. Justin Fields is out there. Even if he's just mediocre, at least half his passing yards will go to Garrett Wilson. They still do not have a number 2 or a number 3 or number 4 wide receiver. Their number 2 target is now the tight end, the rookie tight end, Mason Taylor. That tells you that this is not going to change. Garrett Wilson being second in the NFL in target share per team, that's not going to change. The only guy he's behind is Puka. Garrett Wilson is the offense here, especially the passing offense. He's already 6th in total yards. I mean, what more do you need to push you to start Garrett Wilson? Oh yeah, how about the Cowboys defense?
Yeah, this is almost as good as it gets for a wide receiver. They're allowing the most fantasy points to wide receivers, and I mentioned it when I talked about the Jets, how they look better on paper than they really are. Well, the Cowboys, I said they're allowing the most fantasy points per route run, an absurd 0.44 fantasy points per route run. That is absolutely ridiculous. They're also tied with the Bears, giving up the most receiving touchdowns this year. All of their corners have struggled. I mean, even the guy they just paid, Deron Bland, has not been very good this year, according to Pro Football Focus. Trayvon Diggs is far, far, far from 100% healthy. And again, like you mentioned, if you're worried about Fields and the passing, this is not a week to be worried because Dallas ranks dead last in completion percentage over expectation. In fact, them and the Steelers are the only teams even allowing over an 8% completion percentage over expectation, and they were at 13.8%. Even Justin Fields is probably going to have a pretty good game against this defense. And like you said, all these targets and all these yards are going to Garrett Wilson. I wouldn't shock me if Garrett Wilson's the wide receiver 1 this week.
Yeah, look, Jerry Jones might not miss Micah Parsons. I bet you that the Cowboys fans and the Cowboys players and the Cowboys coaches, especially on defense, yeah, they miss him. All right, now it's running back time. Promised you a rookie. Here we go. I know that it hasn't been a huge output yet in any individual week for Quinshon Judkins of Cleveland, and there's no mistaking it. Cleveland offense in general, it's just not that great. And all of a sudden we got a new quarterback, a rookie quarterback no less, which, I mean, I think you'll realize this is a good thing, but whether you think it is or not, it's a good thing for Judkins. Like, now, first of all, mentioning guys like Garrett Wilson and target share, how about Judkins as a rookie running back who didn't even play in week 1, let's remind you, and didn't even practice at all this offseason, and somehow he's now 3rd among all running backs in team share in terms of carries. And that number is probably going to go up because nobody else is doing anything in this offense as far as touching the ball. The guy who's number 1 has been Tony Pollard. Well, he has had no competition. Spears is about to come back. that number is going to go down. Judkins is going to be the leading workhorse in terms of all running backs by the time the season is over. Just kind of wrap your head around that. All right, and also Judkins has been good in every game in terms of efficiency. He's averaging 4.8 yards per carry. Like, we know that's good, but I don't think we realize how good it is, because in his last 2 games, he's faced top 12 run defenses in Green Bay and Detroit. Like, these are teams that don't give up a high rushing average to running backs. And yet Judkins is consistently grinding out yardage every time he gets the ball. I really think that having a quarterback who is maybe less prone to turning the ball over, a little bit more careful with his throws, like Dillon Gabriel probably will be, this is just going to be even better for Judkins. And some people might be skeptical because, like, wow, man, it's the Vikings. That's a legit defense. You're right. It's a legit pass defense, but I don't think this is an issue at all for Judkins.
No, you said it. You look at the Minnesota defense this year. They're allowing the second fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but the 11th most fantasy points to running backs. They are kind of a run funnel defense, right? Very hard to throw on this team, but you can attack them through that running game. Not only that, they have the 6th worst stuff percentage. Those are runs that on first down go for less than 4 yards, or on any other down go for less than 3 yards. So they're not really tackling running backs for losses here very often, and Judkins is a guy who's rarely getting tackled for a loss, breaking tackles. They also have the 7th worst yards before contact per attempt. And this Cleveland offensive line's actually been okay this year. They're 11th, according to ESPN, in run block win rate. And you said it. I mean, Judkins is the guy here. Judkins looks absolutely phenomenal here. And I think with Dillon Gabriel, we're just going to see him lean on Judkins even more here. And the offense really can't be worse than it was with Joe Flacco, right? So I think this guy could absolutely have his best game of the season so far this week. I loved him last week. Wasn't able to put him on the booms. Got him on here this week, and I'm excited for it.
I already know some of you still kind of playing musical quarterbacks at that position, especially if you lost a guy like Burrow. There's some teams on bye this week. And some of you have the luxury of picking good quarterbacks off the waiver wire. We don't always go with a guy that, number one, is on the road, and number two, is facing a team where you figure they're going to be the front runner because passing volume tends to come from negative game script. But I think you got to take a really hard look at Jared Goff having a big game this week. Now, we've actually made a big deal about this the last couple of years. You might hear us say home Goff, road Goff, about the splits here. I mean, there's something to this. This started way back his 2nd season in Detroit. It was extreme. In fact, that season, he threw 23 touchdowns in home games and only 6 on the road. I mean, he was legit almost unstartable when he wasn't playing in the dome at home. And last year wasn't as extreme, but still, he averaged 22 more yards per game at home. And if you look at this year, what he's done so far, it's kind of continued, because the very first game of the season, remember, they got rolled by Green Bay. Goff was bad, and then comes back at home the next week and throws over 300 yards and like 5 touchdowns. And so we're like, okay, here we go again. Home Goff, road Goff. But I don't think it's that simple. It has to do with the matchup. And of course, I'm going to tell you, he's got a great matchup this week, but also I don't think the game script is necessarily going to work against him.
Yeah, this is a great matchup. I mean, against the Bengals, like we've been saying, look, you start your quarterbacks against Cowboys, the Ravens until they get healthy, and the Bengals. The Bengals right now are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to QBs, but they've played Joe Flacco, Trevor Lawrence, Carson Wentz, and Bo Nix. And they're still allowing the 5th most fantasy points to QBs. Like, they've played like 3 of the worst quarterbacks in the league, and they're still getting torched by these guys. They're allowing the 3rd highest pass rate over expectation right now. They have the 6th lowest sack percentage and the 6th lowest pressure rate right now. They're not going to get any pressure on Jared Goff. And they only have one corner that even ranks in the top 30. That's Dax Hill. And you know, I'm not worried about Goff this week, even if somehow, if they blow out the Bengals. The Lions don't care. The Lions do not. Dan Campbell, they do not care what the score is. They don't take the foot off the gas here. Even if they're up big, he could still be throwing touchdowns late in this game. This is a smash spot for Jared Goff. Got to be one of the best quarterback options of the week.
All right, so those are some players we both love this week. You feel like, you have them. You got to put them in there. If you do play in one of our draft lane leagues, you hit that boost feature and get extra points out of them. Now, we don't always see eye to eye about every player. These are still players. Look, I'm not going to necessarily say I don't want to start them, but you like this guy a little bit better than me, and the next one will be vice versa. But you're going back to that Cowboys-Jets game, which makes sense.
I am, and to be honest, I might like Javonte Williams a little more than George Pickens this week because I feel like the Jets are worse against the run than the pass. But not only that, Javonte looks so good this year. I mean, right now he's 4th among all running backs in expected fantasy points, 10th in snap percentage, 6th in percentage of team rushes, and 8th in percentage of routes run. He ranks 3rd among all running backs in success rate, 4th in yards after contact per attempt, and 14th in yards before contact per attempt. I mean, he kind of looks like the guy we hoped we were going to get ever since he was drafted, 4 or 5 years ago now? Maybe he's just finally healthy. Maybe it's the offense. Who knows? But he looks good. Not only that, you don't have to worry about when he gets near the goal line getting vultured here. He's tied for 2nd most carries inside the 5-yard line, only 2 less than Josh Jacobs. And he's got 6 of the 7 carries inside the 5-yard line. You don't have to worry about Miles Sanders stealing a touchdown from him here. Not to mention this Cowboys offensive line's actually been pretty good. Right now, ESPN has him ranked 9th in run block win rate. And like I said, I think this might be a slightly better matchup for Javonte than George Pickens. The Jets are allowing the 10th most fantasy points to running backs. They gave up huge games to James Cook in week 2, a big game to Devon Achane here. Now, I know Bucky Irving didn't have a big game against them, but remember, Tampa Bay was down 3 starting offensive linemen in that game. I think Javonte is going to be just fine here. And in this Dallas offense, he's always got a great chance to score a touchdown. And unlike last week where they're going to be, throwing the ball all game long because both teams are scoring a ton of points, I'm not sure the Jets can put up a ton of points. So it could be a game where the Cowboys are actually winning and able to run the ball with Javonte Williams. So Javonte Williams to me is borderline a must start this week. You got to have him in your lineup.
Yeah, I'll just say it's still going to take a little time for me to wrap my hand around guys like Javonte Williams, Quentin Johnson being must-starts. But look, we're already almost a quarter of the way into the season. And so I think Javonte Williams already might be my biggest miss from the preseason. Don't think we can doubt him anymore. Now, one of the biggest misses possibly, again, season's not over, and there's still time to turn it around. But I know we're still waiting for Ladd McConkey to break out. I'm not putting him in here. I don't know. I thought last week might be the week for him. Everything seemed to be in place. And yet, what did we see for Ladd McConkey? His first read target percentage is going down every week. And yet, Quentin Johnson and Keenan Allen, it remains unchanged. You know who I think has the best matchup this week in that Chargers offense? It's Keenan Allen. Now, a lot of people might say, oh no, what happened? Quentin Johnson's the number 1 receiver here. Keenan Allen didn't score. Ladd McConkey, who knows? I'm not going to talk about QJ. I guess he's just going to keep it going, but you can't worry about Keenan. He has been a stud all season long. And this matchup, I'm going to like him for the same reasons. I picked Drake London last week. Some of the same reasons. It's not like I feel like this is a get-right spot for the Chargers, but that matchup against Washington, you saw that secondary can definitely get exploited. They don't have any good corners who can shut down receivers like this. And what's crazy about this Chargers offense is it's pass heavy, and it's kind of hard to wrap our minds around this because as far as I know, unless they've replaced him or done a body swap, it's still Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator. Yeah, the guy who used to be with Baltimore, the guy who wants to run the ball on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down and only pass it if necessary. And it's been different. It has changed this year, and it's not because, we've got a rookie running back. They've got a really good rookie running back, and it's not because of Najee. Come on. They're not changing their whole offensive scheme because of him. It's because they have decided that, look, Justin Herbert's our best player. He's going to go out there and throw the ball. We're going to win with this passing game, and it's working. And what's also crazy is the fact that Keenan Allen, despite the fact that he's top 15 in the NFL in routes run, because, again, the Chargers are pretty pass-heavy this year, he's 3rd in this offense on his own team. Yes, Ladd McConkey is running like the 2nd most routes out of all players in the NFL, and Quentin Johnson is above him too. Keenan Allen is 3rd on his own team, and yet he is far outproducing Ladd, as you know, and he's not that far behind QJ. Touchdowns are kind of the big separator this year. This week, this matchup, Keenan is the one you should favor. Based on fantasy points data and coverage matchups this week, he's a top 10 receiver in expected fantasy points per route run. I just told you he's top 15 in the entire NFL in routes run. He's going to rack up points. He's got the matchup you want to exploit. He's the one who's been productive here. I think Keenan Allen has another big game this week, so I'm definitely keeping in all my lineups. All right, if you still haven't checked out all the start, sit videos and everything you need to help win, get that edge for week 5, it's all here in this playlist.